Howdy, howdy, Suitable here, and welcome to the continuation of our best units between 400 gold, 401 and 600 gold. Really, our best infantry on an infantry engagement. Now, I already went through the bottom five, I went through the top five, and I'm going to go through the middle group. And I just want to say thanks for, I had one comment that said, hey, did you test the Sartosa Free Company? I didn't see it. And I'm like, oh my god, I missed them. So I got the Sartosa Free Company in here for this video. So I did get that testing completed, and I want to go over how this is done. Now, there is a primer video as well, which goes over exactly how I've done the testing. It shows a sample of the testing, goes over the spreadsheet work, the data, how many tests I did, and what I tested against. Basically, long story short, I tested against basic dwarf longbeards and basic Skaven clan rats, and I tested all 24 units, infantry units, no regiments of renown, base units in this 401 to 600 gold region, and we've looked at the value proposition. So this is the value proposition. Now, this is one piece of data. I understand there are many ways to test, there are many ways to look at the data. I do like to try and make the tests that I do very transparent so you can see how I've done the testing. I released all the data right up front so you can see the data for yourself, because even though there is a certain amount of objectivity in terms of what the test actually does, it's still subjective in terms of what I chose to test, even that I chose 401 to 600 gold, and how I interpreted the results. So take this with as another piece of the puzzle in evaluating units, this one single test as an additional piece of information. So with that said, we will start going, and we are going to look at, out of our 24 total units, we're going to look at number 19 to number 6, and we will go in rank order in the middle. And this is kind of something that most, you see top fives, bottom fives, you never see the middle, the boring middle. So I do want to rank these and go over, and we'll have a bit of a discussion on them. So coming in at number 19, just avoiding being in the bottom five, is a unit that I wouldn't have expected to be here, but it surely is, and that is from the Wood Elves at 550 gold, the Dryad. Now, when I looked at the Dryad, you would think it would be a little bit better as an infantry unit, but it turns out it is not that great. Now, it does do magic damage, and one of the units it went against was the Longbeards, and it did very poorly against the Longbeards, but it didn't do that awesome against the Clan Rats either. Like, it did okay. It wasn't awful against the Clan Rats, but it wasn't as good as you think it should be. And it's probably one of those units that needs a little nudge in the upward direction when you look at where it is in the pantheon of units between 401 and 600 gold. So, the next unit that is coming in at number 18 is from Bretonnia. And this is a unit that is talked about from time to time, and that is at 600 gold, the Battle Pilgrim. Now, Battle Pilgrims do have shields, and they're sort of in that mid-range infantry. They're lightly armored, and they're just not that great in an infantry fight, and they don't have anything special in terms of the anti-large. They have some little things here and there, but coming in way down to the bottom of this grouping is you would expect them to be a tiny bit higher when it comes to how they stratify. But yeah, coming in at number 18, Bretonnia, 600 gold, the Battle Pilgrims. Maybe they should be down here, because Bretonnia is actually their infantry is very well stratified. I love how they've done it, but in general, Battle Pilgrims are fairly weak. And I think that's the general consensus of people that I see playing Bretonnia, is that Battle Pilgrims are a little weak. Maybe they need a little boost, I don't know. Coming in at number 17, from Norska at 525 gold, is the Marauders with great weapons. And this is the second set of tests in a row where the Norskan Marauders came in lower than their Chaos Brethren Marauders, even though the Norskan Marauders have that mechanic that they cycle through. Turns out that extra 25 gold you pay for them is just enough to make them weaker. So pretty interesting. They get the mechanic, but they're still a little bit weaker than regular Chaos Marauders. Now, it is worth noting that the Marauders with great weapons did excellent against the Longbeards. They pulled some pretty good numbers in that fight because they have great weapons. They are armor piercing, and they're going up against the Longbeards that have a lot of armor, 100 armor. They didn't do so well against the Skaven, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that A, Skaven don't have a lot of armor, so armor piercing is not going to get as much value against them, but B, the Marauders just don't have a ton of armor themselves, so the Clan Rats can do some damage back. Alright, coming in next at number 16 from Chaos at 500 gold, the Chaos Marauders with great weapons. So they're direct competitor, they're brothers, they don't have the faction mechanic that Norska does, but everything I said about the Marauders with great weapons, goes with the Chaos Marauders with great weapons. They're good against the Longbeards, not great against the Clan Rats. So there's not really a whole lot to go over with the Chaos version, which I guess is the original version in terms of this game. Coming in at number 15, we're kind of getting right to the dead middle. We got 24 units, so 12 is about the middle. So coming in very close to the middle is from the Beastmen at 550 gold, the Goreherd with shields. Now, in the first video, I said it was actually nice to see that the Goreherd had themselves had got buffed at 600 golds. They made it into the top 5. Now you see the Goreherd with shields sort of in at 15, and this is what you would expect to see in terms of maybe not so far apart on this list, but that the Goreherd with shields should be below the Goreherds in terms of total value generated in an infantry engagement, and that's exactly what you do see here. So I think that's, they probably do belong right around in 15, kind of in that area. That's probably about right. All right, moving on. Coming in at number 14, right about the middle, and really I think is the example of where these undead units should be. From the vampire counts, 500 gold is the Crypt Ghoul. And, I like the Crypt Ghoul because it's a... And we did some additional testing against, Flagellants and Nehekara Warriors against the Crypt Ghouls, because Crypt Ghouls aren't even quite average. They're just slightly below average. They're not a spectacular unit. I don't even know if they've ever had a nerf or a buff. They've always been pretty okay, I think. From memory, I don't know if they've ever had a nerf or a buff. I might go take a look at that sometime just to see if that has been the case, but they changed from game 1 to game 2 just like every other unit did, but they've really never received special attention, nor have they needed it. They're an interesting unit. They are not overpowered, they're not underpowered, they have poison, they have their own thing, they don't have a whole lot of armor, and they come in at number 14, and I think they're a sort of a nice unit to look at as representative of the sort of middle of this grouping. Alright, coming in at number 13, we're almost right on average, is from the Dark Elves at 450 gold, and that is the Bleak Sword. So, again, the Bleak Swords coming quite a bit above the Dread Spears. The Dread Spears were in our bottom 5, and the Bleak Swords should be above them, and they are. And, what this is saying is that whether it's intended to or not, the Dark Elves' cheap, quote-unquote, infantry at 450, and they're both at 450, are really not that great. And you really do see a lot of pretty fantastic infantry in the Dark Elves lineup. Like the Witch Elves are amazing, the Hargoneth Executioners are amazing, the Blackguard of Naggarond are amazing, the... they have I can't remember the unit at 750, which is anti-infantry. They have some very strong infantry up and down their roster, but their Dread Spears and their Bleak Swords are pretty meh. They're not that great. But, I mean, it is what it is. Coming in at number 12, and here is where we're going to talk about stratification, from the Wood Elves at 550 gold, the Eternal Guard with shields. And this is exactly what I mean when I talk about how units stratify and how they should stratify in terms of value. Now the base Eternal Guard without a shield is in the bottom 5. It is one of the bottom 5 worst units in this segment on the infantry on infantry engagement. Now the Eternal Guard with shields should produce less value in an infantry fight than an Eternal Guard, because you have to give something up to get that shield. So what this is saying, when the Eternal Guard with shields, and it's a silver shield too, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but the Eternal Guard with shields at 550 gold is just a straight up better value than the Eternal Guard without a shield in every single scenario. Why would you ever get the Eternal Guard at 475 unless you literally just didn't have 70? You were missing 75 gold at the end of a build. That would be the only reason you get an Eternal Guard for the Wood Elves for any reason, if you were paying attention to the actual value of the unit. And that, again, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, and this type of thing that is counterintuitive in a game that is rock, scissors, papers and meant to be intuitive is actually bad for new players. Because if you're a new player, you would think intuitively that the difference between an Eternal Guard and an Eternal Guard with shields in terms of their value in the frontline engagement is that you're going to give something up to get those shields. Turns out you don't give anything up to get to those shields. You actually gain something on top of the shield, and that is infantry on infantry capability. You gain that capability and you're way up the list and coming in at number 12 right halfway through our list, as opposed to the Eternal Guard, which is just a weak unit. I mean, it is anti-large, so it's always going to be at the bottom. But this Eternal Guard with shields being above the Eternal Guard is very... I think these types of things are bad for the game in general. All right. And, you know, not to end the rant, coming in at number 11 from Norska at 450 gold is the Marauder Spearman. And this is exactly what I'm talking about again. You would think intuitively that the Marauder Spearman would not be as valuable in an infantry fight as a Marauder with a great weapon, but it turns out that it is. It's actually not that bad in a fight against the Longbeards, and it's not that bad again fight against the Clan Rats. And when you add up all the data and you crunch it through, they're actually they pull slightly more value than the Chaos Marauders with great weapons. Now here is the difference when you think about these things. In a random sampling of units in a random set of battles, picking the Marauder Spearman over the Marauders with great weapons will be a good choice. When you get into very specific things, like if you're playing against the Daohi who have nothing but armored infantry and no large, well, just a few large in the lords, you would never pick the Marauder Spearman. But you know, that's where you're starting to apply your knowledge, and the whole purpose of this type of video is to get that sort of knowledge into your wheelhouse. You know, because you know you're not going to pick the Marauder Spearman ever against the Daohi. But that said, when you look at the total value, the Marauder Spearman shows up ahead of the Marauders with great weapons, and they shouldn't. The Marauder Spearman should be down this list in an infantry engagement quite a bit. So either they need to be nerfed, or maybe they need a little cost increase. Maybe they need to be in at 475, something like that. Or the Chaos Marauders with great weapons need a little buff. Whatever needs to take place to get those two units to switch places on this list would be what I would advocate. And I think really, when I look at this list, I would say the Marauder Spearmen just need a straight up nerf. Because there are other Marauder units, infantry units down there. There's not like the High Elves. Their only unit down there is their Spearmen. So they pretty much have to be good at everything just to make the High Elves viable. This is not the case with Norska. They have Spearmen, they have Marauders with great weapons, they have regular Marauders with shields. They have even, you know, auxiliary units like Warhounds or the Ice Wolves, and you know, they have other units sort of down in that cost range, so they don't have anything weird going on where you'd want to make this Marauder Spearman an awesome unit. But turns out it is a good all-around unit, though it doesn't have shields. All right, rant off maybe. Coming in at number 10 from the dwarfs at 500 gold, Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons. And I was sort of happy to see them in this position. Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons, in terms of the three major Dowie with Great Weapons down in the tier 2, tier 3, and we'll call it trash tier, tier 4, which is Longbeards with Great Weapons, Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons, and Miners. Turns out that Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons are probably the very best in an infantry engagement. You know, in general, they're not that fantastic, but Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons are generally the best. They still did not pull positive value against the Clan Rats or the Longbeards. So I want to make sure that's clear, is that the Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons still didn't pull positive value against these units that they should crush. Okay, they didn't, but they are sort of number 10, about average in this pantheon of units. Now we start getting into the Greenskins. The Greenskins have a heck of a lot of units down here, and they did take the number 1 position at 450 gold with the Night Goblin Fanatics, and coming in at number 9 is the Savage Orc at 550 gold. Now, Savage Orcs are a beautiful little unit if you just look how it operates, because it is all risk reward, and I sort of love how they set up the Savage Orcs, and they're actually quite a good unit. They can mow through low tier infantry. They did very well against the Clan Rats, and they did reasonably against the Longbeards, but they don't have shields, so they're very vulnerable. They don't have armor, though they do have physical resistance, so they're quite vulnerable. But if you can get them in there, they're going to do the job. And at 550 gold, they're actually going to do a pretty good job. They're a nice little unit. Like, the Greenskins really are stacked for their infantry, sort of all around. Like, they just don't have any real, what you would call, trash in their entire lineup. And this is just an example of their lowest ranked infantry in the 401 to 600 gold group, in which they have a lot of units, is the Savage Orcs at rank 9. And anyone who's played the game knows Savage Orcs do have their place. They have matchups where they really excel. They do have, I think, Frenzy, so they have immunity to psychology if their leadership is about 50%. So they are just a nice little unit, and they fit in very nicely, and they're awesome when you get all the other bonuses like WA, etc., etc. So, coming in at number 8, another Greenskin at 450 gold, and that is just the basic Orc Boy. Turns out the Orc Boy, with their shields and their minimal armor, are just pretty reliable. They are a pretty decent unit at 450 gold. They pull their value. You don't see them a whole lot because, and it is one of those things that, it's like the Dowie. You do not see Quarrelers with Great Weapons a whole lot, even though they are actually quite good at 80 armor. They don't have their shields, but it's just because everything else is so good in the Dowie lineup when it comes to ranged units that you don't see some of the Dowie range, which are still very good. This is an example of that. The Greenskins lineup in this area, they just have so many great units to choose from, all the way down to sort of 300 gold, and all the way up to the Black Orc. You don't see Orc Boys very much, but turns out they're pretty good. They are a really good all-arounder. And when it comes to the like the Savage Orcs did, obviously they did much better against the Clan Rats and much worse against the Longbeards. The Orc Boys were sort of about the same place against both of them. You know, the Orc Boys are just a plugger. They're just a unit that does their job, and they actually do it pretty well. All right. Coming in at number 7, another Greenskin unit. You know, at 500 gold is the Nasty Skulker. The Nasty Skulker is a phenomenal unit in the right situation, but a good unit all around. They actually did pretty reasonably against the Clan Rats, and they did very, very well against the Longbeards. It's because they have that extra armor piercing that pops if they're not losing. On top of all of that, they also have the flash bomb, so that if any unit lands or comes near them, they hit the flash bomb and they're at minus 76% speed for, I don't know, like 10 seconds or whatever it is, and it actually, they can use it as many times as they want during the battle. Like the Nasty Skulker is a scary unit in multiplayer. Like, I know I always worry about them, because if you're not paying attention to those freaking things, and yeah, like anyone who watches my channel knows how much I hate freaking goblins on top of everything, but if you don't pay attention to them, they will rack up the kills in the right situation. Turns out there's a reason. They're just a good all-around unit in this sort of price range, and this is again why you don't see Orc Boys. I mean, you have the Night Goblin Fanatics, who are the #1 unit. You have Night Goblins at 400. You have, you know, Goblin Spears at 300. You have Savage Orcs at 550. Nasty Skulkers at 500. And then you got the Orc Boys. And if you want to go up a little bit, you got some other units which are anti-large but still good in infantry engagements. So you just don't see these poor Orc Boys, because they're just sort of a plugger in amongst units that have can pull much higher value in specific situations. So in competitive, you see a lot of competitive, really good competitive players don't necessarily pick just all-around good armies. They tend to pick hyper-focused armies for specific threats. And that's where a top-level player generally not going to pick an Orc Boy. They'll pick a Nasty Skulker for a specific armor-piercing application. They're going to pick Savage Orcs for a very specific application. They're going to pick Night Goblin Fanatics for a very specific application. So Orc Boys sort of get left behind, but for those of us like me who aren't the most amazing general in the world, and if you do play the greenskins, the Orc Boys are not bad, but these Nasty Skulkers, they are definitely nasty at #7. Now, coming in at #6, which is the last unit on this list, turns out when I did the testing, because I did it a little late, they are actually #4, so they are in the top 5, and I'm not going to go back and edit the videos. I will, though, and on my updates always show them in the correct location, is from Vampire Coast at 450 gold, the Sartosa Free Company. So it turns out that these units are pretty darn good. And when we saw pre-release of the Vampire Coast, we saw the Sartosa Free Company had great weapons, or the axes, and they did armor-piercing damage, and then they sort of tuned them down a little bit and just gave them anti-infantry but not armor-piercing. Turns out they are still very solid infantry, and I would think they are good enough that if you didn't need one of the very specific lords that wasn't Aranus Assault Spite, that it would be a, you know, if you're playing multiplayer and you want to play the Vampire Coast, but just best to play Sartosa, because maybe you need them, maybe you don't, maybe you want them, maybe you don't. They're just a good unit. They're a good infantry unit. They are they're going to do something different than your other frontline infantry if you're playing the Vampire Coast in terms of, you know, the zombie frontline, which just hold. It turns out the Sartosa Free Company don't just hold. They can actually kill stuff. And they did pretty good against the Clan Rats. They did pretty good against the Longbeards. They, like I said, they came up in our top 5. They come in at #4, actually, ahead of the Beastmen. They bumped them Beastmen down to #5. And they bumped the High Elves out of the top 5s with their Spearmen. So, I mean, that kind of makes me happy, I guess. You know, I mean, I don't hate elves like I hate freaking goblins, but you know, it is probably a good thing. So Sartosa Free Company, thank you for the comments, and and hey, did you for looks like you didn't test the Sartosa Free Company. I mean, when I did that, I was like, it was sort of like a, you know, a facepalm moment. Like, oh frick, how did I not think about these units? But it's easy because they're not sort of in the main set of units, and turns out the Sartosa Free Company are very good, and they are worthwhile if you generally like builds with just Vampire Lords or Aranus Assault Spite. Pick Sartosa. Otherwise, you're wasting an extremely good unit in that 401 to 600 gold sort of range, which the Vampire Coast has none other than, like, when you just play the regular Vampire Coast, they don't have real good infantry in that range. They have the basic zombie mobs at 300 and the pole arms at 400, which do their job, but they're sort of missing some punch down low, and the Sartosa Free Company does give them that. So I mean, they can't be healed like the undead and everything, but they're a very solid unit. Anyways, that is number 19, number 6, which is really number 4. And I will be making one more video where I'm going to sort of review everything together in context. I will probably talk a little bit more about stratification. Maybe I should make a separate video on it because it's important. I think it's important enough to the game to do so, in terms of, so people can understand a lot of times where I'm coming from, why I say what I say, is it's coming from this place of, for me personally, making the game more accessible to new players. Because I would love to see this multiplayer community flourish. I mean, I don't play a lot of multiplayer myself. I mean, play it sometimes, and because I love analysis, you know, this is sort of my thing. I love analysis. I probably 50 hours of analysis for every 1 hour of multiplayer online play, sort of something like 50 to 1, something like this, because I just love doing this sort of thing. But I would like for new players to sort of be able to see and understand what a unit does and where it might be good. And when there are units that are sort of weird, they don't work, or they don't fit into that clear understanding of where they should be, like the Nehakar Warriors. Like Nehakar Warriors at number 22 being so terrible, I mean, that's a bad idea, because they're damage dealing anti-infantry, and when you put them into a battle, they're going to suck. You know, that's not what you want. Same with the Flagellants being so bad. You know, when you see that your Eternal Guard are actually worse in an infantry engagement than Eternal Guard with shields, this doesn't make sense. And it's really the purpose of making it as intuitive as practical to new players coming into the game, because I have a feeling, you know, there's going to be an influx of new players after Game 3. I think between now and then there's going to be a lot more focus on multiplayer, and I would love for this community to grow. I would love for it to really flourish and really, you know, grow in a major way. And I think one of the ways that we do that is being friendly to new players, in terms of having rock mean rock, paper mean paper, and scissor mean scissor. Because when scissor means rock and you didn't know it, it's frustrating. And especially, it might not be frustrating, especially if you don't understand why that's happening. You could lose over and over and over, not because of your lack of skill, but just because of your choices. In terms of picking the wrong units from the wrong factions, turns out those units are just a bad choice because for some reason they're weaker than the units they should be stronger than. So that's sort of my thinking on that idea. Anyways, I would love to hear from you. Would love to hear your thoughts on the list, where they're at in the ranking, and how they showed up. Are there any surprises to you? I mean, the biggest surprise to me would have to be the Dryads at number 19, and then the Battle Pilgrims, and, you know, Chaos Marauders, and then you start seeing, like, these units like Eternal Guards way up there, and, you know, so you got some Spears up there. So that's sort of a little surprising. I would say the Dryads are the most surprising, because the Dryads really look badass. They are a beautiful model, and when you look at them, they look really good, and they turned out to be quite weak. Of course, they would be a little stronger against non-Dowie infantry that has that magic resistance, but they still didn't do amazingly against the clan rats. They did okay. They weren't amazing against them, right? Their stats, in terms of where they finished in all 4 of the tests, they are... Where are the Dryads? I will say 5, 10, 18... You know, 5, 10, and 18 against the clan rats. So sort of an averaging of about position 12. So maybe that's where they should be about. But anyways, love to hear from you. I love comments, and I know I say I love comments all the time because I really do love comments. That's why I say it, and they help my videos. And it's only because of a comment that I got the Sartosa Free Company. I probably would have taken 6 months to a year to even notice that I didn't have Sartosa in there. You know, maybe on an update I might have noticed it. So thank you very much for that comment. And with that said, hope you found it interesting, and I will see you soon.